A new report from Children First Canada finds that a vast amount of kids are facing major threats to their well-being, which includes bullying, child poverty, and mental health.
Joining us live this morning is Sarah Austin, the CEO of Children First Canada. Sarah, appreciate your time to talk about this conversation today here. The number is 71% of students between the ages of 12 and 17 reported being, bullied in some form or another. Sarah, what that says to me is, in some cases, with that kind of a number, the bullies are also being bullied.
Yeah, an overwhelming number of our kids are being impacted by bullying. They're experiencing it, but often reacting to it too, and they're witnessing it, whether it's in their classrooms, in the playground, or online. Our kids are being exposed to it in every domain of their life. And what I think for me as a parent was even more concerning was that only 25% of students felt that they were supported by their teachers within their school setting to be able to address bullying. So, so many of them struggling with it and yet not feeling adequately supported. That's not to suggest that teachers don't care and aren't trying, but there's a disconnect between what teachers think is happening and what students feel is happening within their classrooms.
And you have to remember that some students often don't report this for fear of retribution or just feelings of shame. And I think a lot of the issues that this report highlights are interconnected. Another staggering or alarming finding is that 1.4 million children living in poverty by the end of 2024.
Yeah, it's the highest increase in child poverty we've seen since 2017. It's really alarming to see that a country as wealthy as ours is allowing so many of our kids to fall behind. To think about 13.4% of our kids growing up in poverty being, struggling with their basic survival needs, whether it's adequate housing or nutritious breakfast or lunch to eat every day. It's a significant number of kids who were struggling. We saw some measurable progress during the pandemic when there were significant investments being made around addressing these issues. But with the withdrawal of some of those income supports, we're seeing a significant backward slide into poverty, and our kids really struggling with the basic survival needs.
And Sarah, I have to admit, I feel so relieved that I didn't have to grow up in an era of social media and cell phones and things like that. Your report also highlights about 25% or sort of 1 in 5 teens reported cyberbullying. I actually found that number surprisingly low considering how much we hear about cyberbullying. It's too high either way, though, isn't it?
It is, whether it's cyberbullying or, the harmful content kids are exposed to online harms, and, whether, and starting from a young age on platforms like Roblox or YouTube, let alone, the social media apps like Meta and other, we could just go on and on. Our kids are exposed to significant harms day in and day out, feeling like they don't have the tools to be able to keep themselves safe online. Parents are struggling to keep up with these issues, and certainly policymakers are not keeping pace. Canada really falls behind many other wealthy nations when it comes to regulations around holding social media companies accountable and providing parents and young people with the tools that they need to stay safe online.
Yeah, and when you talk about online safety, that, of course, leads us to child sexual exploitation, online sexual exploitation. That's at 35%. And we recently heard about some kind of things regarding Roblox and how that was once kind of a game that was appropriate for a lot of young kids. Now it's kind of changed. It's become kind of like the wild, wild west. And there really are no safeguards keeping up with how fast everything is kind of evolving digitally.
Yeah, there really are no safeguards, and I think a lot of the pressure is being put on parents to try and regulate this. That's simply not, fair and reasonable. I'm a parent who's pretty well educated about these things, who does my very best day in and day out, and I think most parents are really trying their best. But we need our policymakers to step up to really create accountability. For years, we've been calling for the government to implement an Online Safety Act. That bill was finally introduced in the spring, and yet it never crossed the finish line, and so it has to be a top priority with the new session of Parliament this fall.
Yeah, something needs to change, that's for sure, based on the numbers in this report. Sarah Austin is the CEO of Children First Canada. Sarah, appreciate you joining us this morning on the Raising Canada report. Thank you for this.